We still have a few minutes. We are already going into session 8 of all the sessions that we've been having as a part of these celebrations. But we still have a little bit more to go. So we're going to have this session, and then there's another one, and then it is the closing session, which I hope also you are all able to join, where we will try to look back at all these discussions we have had, and then at the same time try to plan or to look a little bit into the future of what the network is going to be doing.
3 more minutes.
Comments, please share them in the chat. You can do that from now on. If you cannot hear or see, please, the best recommendation is that you close your program and then close other programs, restart the webinar, and then join us again. It's important to mention that we are recording this event. We know we have to announce this. And then the idea is that we're going to put the microphones off so that we don't disturb each other with additional noise. But of course, we will have them open in the breakout rooms, and we will try to exchange as much as possible. As you know, this is the 8th of a series. So we are going to be talking about experience capitalization today, but this is part of a set of sessions, of discussion meetings that we've been having since yesterday, and even before of this, because this is part of the celebration of the 20 years of the km4dev group. You all know we have been mentioning this. We are celebrating 20 years of exchange, 20 years of interaction, 20 years of a lot of discussion and a lot of ideas coming up with a lot of people. So it was a nice way of getting all of us together in different parts of the world, and then continue sharing, exchanging, discussing ideas. This session is part of that. And as I said before, we had an opening, and we're going to have a closing session where you are all, of course, invited also to join, and to, if you are not part of the community, join the community and continue sharing, continue exchanging, and continue developing knowledge management practices. As I said, this is a continuum. So we have been having other sessions, and the idea was that we also learn a little bit from what the other sessions have been discussing. So this is what comes from the previous session. I would like to ask Ginetta to tell us a little bit about this.
Yeah, the relay message is a food for thought, which is not necessarily linked to our topic, but it's good to know because it helps to understand the overall idea of our celebration days. So the relay message coming from the previous session is this: leverage on existing infrastructure systems, processes, platforms, people to push the agenda of knowledge management. KM is a subject not understood by most people. So start small. Demonstrate value and achieve buy-in by doing and do small. And I couldn't agree more.
Thank you. That's true. This was a very interesting session on KM with a zero budget. So I think the recommendations are very valid. Thanks a lot. And then, of course, at the end of our session, we will also prepare a short KM advice, which I would like you all to help. And then we will give this to the next session. What are we going to be doing? During these 60 minutes, we are going to be, talking a little bit about experience capitalization. We are going to be, learning, discussing what is it exactly. We don't want to go into detail about the methodology. I think you have already been doing that before, but we would like to see what have been the different efforts have been throughout the years. What different ways have we had to promote, to encourage, especially to encourage others to follow this approach? And how have you been involved in this? And then what we would like to focus in is on how have we been measuring what of these different approaches works. Not just in completing an experience capitalization approach, but in engaging others so that this becomes a more regular practice. So what we would like to see is we need to measure the impact, and we need to see what works and what doesn't work in engaging others. And as I said, in having more and more practitioners following this approach or involving others. We would like to discuss what have you been finding, what are your ideas, and of course, how do we all learn from each other? Yes, so with this in mind, we would like to start with a little poll just to hear a little bit from you. Rocio, can you help us with this?
Here it is.
So you have all been most probably, you have heard about experience capitalization. Where did you hear, where did you learn about it for the first time? How did you come across from which one of these different initiatives? Will it give us a few, well, a couple of minutes, perhaps even less? If you can all vote, please.
We have so far 26 of the 50 people that are present today. 31.
As you can see here, well, you already know, of course, there have been different organizations involved, trying different approaches, and in this way, not just training people, trying out the approach, testing different ways of doing it, and then engaging and sharing the results in different ways. So we wanted to start by, well, just seeing which of these ones are the most known, perhaps, the most recognized.
I think that's it. I think most people have voted. There is no additional one. So here is the results.
Okay, so people do know Action 8. People recognize the documentation workshops that Ilea was organizing several years ago, but more people know the e-learning course from FAO and the FAO, the GFRAS online course. Interesting, of course, that the largest group is others. So if you would like to add on the chat what others means for you, where did you hear about experience capitalization? What initiative is it that brought you into this approach, which is not on this list? Please write a couple of names or ideas on the chat. It would be very interesting to hear from you and to of course expand this menu that we have here, because I'm sure that there is much more going on, or which has been going on in different parts of the world. Then we can stop sharing the results. So, experience capitalization, what is this? What have we been seeing? Building on this list that you have already seen on the poll, I would like to invite Sophie, please, if you can help us a little bit and show, well, much of your own experience here.
So what we have done with Jorge, when we have been developing with plenty of partners the e-learning course on experience capitalization, we went back to the roots. And as we could go up to Paulo Freire with liberating structure, the theory of liberation. But then in 1975, Kolb has this model of experiential learning that has influenced a lot. Then in 94, Pierre de Zutter, with all the experience he had in Latin America, wrote this book, From Experience to Knowledge. And in 2015, we finally have e-learning course that is taking into account a lot of the different methodologies. And you see, it's almost every 20 years that something is happening. So our learning curve is slow, but it keeps going. So next, we can see what is the definition of experience capitalization. So it is a systematic, because you have to do it systematically, iterative, you have to repeat it, participatory, because you don't do it alone, process through which an experience is analyzed and documented. This creates knowledge. This is what Pierre de Zutter was saying, and it can be shared and used to generate change. Plenty of different words have been used by different people. So systematization in Latin America, capitalisation d'expérience in French, and in English, process documentation, lessons learning. So you see many other things. So let's see now in the next slide, what does it mean for individuals like us? How can we benefit? So we mentioned critically analyzing, but also your success and the failures. And it helps you to document. So you see this image, you are looking now what happened in the past so that you can plan better for the future and improve the future. Next slide, we will see what are the benefits for the institutions. Most important, please don't reinvent the wheel. Learn about other innovations, promising practice or good practices. And when you do all these, you're able to have more visibility, credibility, impact. And all these is knowledge capacity development. So knowledge management and experience capitalization, they go all together. So next slide. We are showing you different purposes for doing experience capitalization, different focuses, lessons learning, documentation of practices, developing skill, institutionalization, adaptation, scaling up, advocacy. And here, just a few examples, like in matters, how articles were able to capture all this. And using the FAO good practice template, it's actually to have some guidelines, a checklist to know what do you have to put in it if you want to document your good practice. But then you will see in the next slide that we are doing it also in different projects and programs. And here are just some of them. We mentioned IFAD with NRAP, UNDP, UNIDO, UNICEF, World Food Programme with Africa Adaptation Programme, Knowledge Management and Gender of FAO, and then the big program funded by IFAD with CTA, IICA and FAO on experience capitalization. But there are a lot more, and you can write in the chat what were your programs and projects that were doing experience capitalization, because I'm thinking, for example, of GIZ, previous GTZ that did also a lot, UNDP, there are many others. So it is really interesting also to hear from you what are the projects and programs that you were doing. In the next slide, we are going also to see the trainings. And you see that here we have examples from Bangladesh, from Western Africa, from Central Asia, and from Europe. So we have tried to have this workshop a little bit everywhere in the world. In the next slide, you will see also what are the different publications that were done on the subject. So I have highlighted a few, starting in '96 with the Manual de Sistematización Participativa, and in 2019 with the facilitation of experience capitalization, the guidebook that was done in the project of CTA, IFAD, FAO, and ICA. And all these, you will find them in the e-learning course. And the next slide is really showing this. Can you put the next slide? Yes, it's the e-learning course that we started developing in 2015 and which was then released in different languages. 2016 in English, 2017 in French, 2018 in Spanish, 2019 in Russian. And what did we do in 2020? We decided to have it online, more blended with, due to COVID, instead of face-to-face meeting, webinars. And this will become soon a MOOC. So you see, we are moving from face-to-face workshop. We have been doing online e-learning, and now this massive online learning process. And you can recognize all the people that participated to make this possible. So in the next slide, we are going to see this timeline, because this is our we gave you the few milestones or where did it started and what has been done. So you can also tell us when you started. So if you go to the view option on the top menu bar, you click on view option and then you will find annotate. When you click on annotate, you will have a new menu bar, which gives you the possibility to use arrows or text. And for example, I will click on the arrow and put where I started, and automatically it will show my name in the arrow. If you the arrow doesn't work so well for you, what do? You just use the text and you put your name under the year that you started. So let's take a few seconds to have you joining us, indicating who you are and when you started. while you're doing that, I see that there are many things in the chat. Okay.
Yeah, this is nice. A lot of names popping up. Yeah. And I recognize some of you, your names also.
So what makes experience capitalization a bit different from the lessons learning is that you do this on a regular basis and you do this systematically. So that makes it different.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't do it alone, you do it with others. And you try not to give it to consultants because consultants will gain out of it. You can have consultants to support you, but it is the team doing it who is actually benefiting the most. Therefore, it's really these words that we highlighted in the beginning: systematic, participatory, iterative, are things which are important to take into consideration.
Yes.
Okay, so we can maybe move now to the next exercise.
Yes. Before we're going to have some working groups, but before we do that, I would like to see if we have any questions from the chat. I am not able to read the chat, but Ginetta, is there any question addressed to Sophie that we can ask her?
Yes, there is one question from Raymond Obare. I hope that I pronounced the last name correctly. So the question is, how is experience capitalization different from human-centered adaptive design because they have the same process?
Well, it is the same. Because actually we are basing ourselves on this design. Experience capitalization is really taking methodology from here and there, and that's why there are so many different names. It's just that we have decided to try to have one consensual name of calling it. And because systematization in, for example, in Spanish was more focusing on the systematic approach, but the experience capitalization it's not only, as I said, systematic, but also human-centered, people-centered, and that's why we call it participatory approach. So you will see many different methodologies are using the same approach than in experience capitalization. And at the end, what we want to improve the way we are working. We want to be able to pass the knowledge to others so that others can adapt, adopt, scale up what we are doing, or we want to actually have our organization learning more and improving the way it is performing. So it's team building, it's learning, it's being able to advocate better, to make better decisions. So many different benefits. Thank you for the question. I hope I was able to reply satisfactorily to that.
If we have a bit more time, maybe a couple of minutes, there is a question from Sandarai. Can you share an example, a scenario in which this has worked and how?
Can you repeat it?
Yes. As the question is from Sandarai from India. Can you share an example, a scenario in which this has worked and how?
There are many examples where this has worked. So for example, in Western Africa, and we have used this project, for example, to do the e-learning course. It's a project on the capitalization of good practices on agriculture inputs. So what we started, how did we start? We look at the experiences that already existed. We compared all these experiences to do an analysis and to find what was the conditions to actually be able to replicate this and to make sure that people are not doing always the same mistakes. And then these experiences were documented. Then from the analysis, we came up with good practice. So these good practice were documented. And then we thought, okay, we need to communicate and to share this with different type of stakeholders. So if it's decision makers, maybe we need to have a policy brief. So this is a 2-page document. But if we want to actually discuss with a cooperative, a farmers organization, we need something which is more practical, which can be understood very easily. And because it's in Western Africa where there is literacy issue, we looked at how we could graphically illustrate it. And we also decided, let's actually use also radio programs. And then we decided not any kind of radio programs. We are going to do serials. So we have different like theater, but on the radio. And then we did also little theater plays. So we have used posters, theater, radio, little video, documents, short document, long documents, depending for whom we were doing it. And it worked is because all these different ways of sharing the information, the knowledge, was little by little integrated in the big government program. And these good practices are now part of the big governmental initiative called Les Nigériens nourrissent les Nigériens, so Nigerian feed the Nigerian. And it is because it has been understood, or it has been integrated, there is ownership. And so this is a successful capacity development approach, but also a good experience capitalization. So this is experience from Western Africa. And I'm sure that Jorge can send you plenty from Latin America or from Asia.
Yes. Yeah, if Ginetta, we don't have another question, I think.
We
now.
have several questions, but I think we are running out of the time. We have still the breakout rooms, the debrief, yes, and the wrap up. So Sophie has kindly offered to respond in writing to all these questions offline. So please keep going and place your questions in the chat. I will collect all of them, and then I will share this with Sophie and the rest of the organization team. But for the moment, I think we could proceed with the breakout rooms.
Thank you, Ginetta. Yeah, we will proceed, and then, but I like it that it is especially linked to this last question about showing the results and what has worked. As Sophie said, there are a lot of examples that experience capitalization has worked. With the last project I was in, we were able to see policy briefs being developed in Zimbabwe, for example, and being implemented as a result of the analysis. In Uganda, I think one of the participants in this group was directly involved in this. The analysis and the documentation process led to a new project, a continuation of a big national-wide project, which of course was much better than the previous one because it included all the lessons that had been drawn. But I think that the lessons more interesting are at the individual level. No, our own colleagues who, by analyzing, by reflecting, understand better what we are doing ourselves or what they are doing, and therefore are able to run a better project. That's at an individual level. The problem we see is that many times we don't measure, we don't quantify these big results that we have, big or small, and we are therefore not able to boast, or we are not able to share them completely. And of course, in some cases, there are a lot of these initiatives that we have seen with Sophie over the past 20 years that then, well, maybe they have a very good result, but they stop and that's it. And it doesn't happen anymore. Now, so what we're thinking that all these different projects, initiatives have been there not just to do experience capitalization, but to engage others to continue doing it. So what we would like to do is we are going to go into groups, and we would like you to, in your separate groups, to reflect a little bit. How have you been involving with different types of stakeholders, and how have you been trying to engage them? As I said, not just to do it, but to get them engaged so that they continue doing experience capitalization. So how do you engage? How do you measure these results? And then what do you think we should be doing in order to get better results, not just as a one-off exercise, but a continuous activity that continues and continues, and there is more and more of these processes going on. We will ask you to look at different stakeholders, because at the same time, we work with different types of people. Some of us are working with individuals or encouraging individual people to do their own capitalization process and learn on their own. Many of us are working with development organizations. Others are working with local authorities, government office, and others are working with more, I don't know, civil society organizations, private groups, private businesses. So we will divide you into random groups, and we would like you to explore these questions according to the group to which you will be assigned. Yes?
So the questions are on the chat, and I am attaching a link where you can actually go there and take notes in your group. Be aware that each group has a name. So on the slide, you have to look at the slide that has the name of the group. Okay, so you can identify in the group, within the group, a rapporteur, and then type all your notes. Okay, so you are going to be sent to the groups right now. Can you stop sharing, Jorge, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, apologies for this. We always have some minor complications, but then that's how we also learn how to make the best of it, of course. And another problem is that we always have a little bit too little time. So that's another thing. But still, we have a minute still to hear from you. What are your main concerns, ideas, suggestions? I would suggest for those of you who still have something to say, to put your ideas on the chat, please, because we can still look at this and still, of course, continue communicating with each other. But without wasting more time, I would like to hear from some of the groups. I think that the groups were not all there, so I will just pick one person. And I will ask this person to tell something that he has heard, which is interesting, or what's some of the ideas. So I was in the group with Krishan. So Krishan, I'm going to pick you. Can you share some ideas, please?
I think in our group, what happened was we did a quick round of introductions, and quite a few of the people are involved in KM. Some of them are even teaching, and some of them are working in a position of knowledge management. So I think less than half were familiar with the concept of experience capitalization. But we had a few testimonies from Uganda, for example, where the project, for example, organized under the aegis of the Office of the Prime Minister, looking at collection of information about government programs and getting the technical teams to work together. It sounded a bit like a data collection process, but I guess this is how it starts. And it's the analysis that matters later on. So in general, when we did the kind of tour de table, most people said that what was presented sounds familiar, but they're still keen to understand what experience capitalization process actually means. And we were in the middle of a discussion about what difference between a knowledge product and an information product, and how does experience capitalization, for example, help to differentiate these. Because very often we talk of these, success stories, impact stories, lessons learned, but is that the objective of capitalization, or is there more to it? And that was a debate we were in the middle of when we had to come back. Thank you. Yeah,
thanks a lot. Of course, it's always too short. And as you say, not everybody has been directly involved in a similar process. Now Sophie showed 20 years, but that doesn't mean that everybody's been involved in this for 20 years. I would like to ask Alessandro from LuxDev, because he says that the time was too short. So I'm sure that he has something else to say. Is it possible for you to share some ideas about especially answering the questions? I don't know where you are. I'm trying to look at you.
Hello, everyone.
Yes, there you are.
Yes. No, I was just saying it was too short because it took us a bit of time to get into the discussion because we were not sure who was going to preside or rapporteur or things like that. That's why it was a bit too short. Somebody was talking and he got cut halfway through a sentence. due to the session. For us, so regarding the questions, let me try and find the presentation that we have somewhere. So in terms of the first question, what did you do to engage your stakeholders in the experience capitalization process? We discussed about a few different things, but in terms of LuxDev, for us, we're currently writing a guide on experience capitalization. Yeah. So we can assist the teams with experience sharing, so we can assist them on the field, and we can show them what can be learned from experience capitalization and how it should be done within our agency. So we're still at a very early process, because initially our experience capitalization was done just very much like at certain times of projects, like towards the end, and that's about it. So there was no really capitalization on those experience at the end of it. So that's what we're trying to do right now.
And how are you going to measure if this works or doesn't work? Are you focusing on a specific type of indicators or ideas to see if you are going on the right track?
So that's the thing. We're also in the middle of a revolution in terms in LuxDev, because we're changing a whole IT suite. So we kind of, with the new IT suite that we will have, we'll have a way to measure how the downloads will be done for the certain types of documents. We'll have direct feedback from the people, and this is the kind of stuff that we will work on at the start, like initially. And then the more we will have feedback about it, what's working, what is not working, we might change and use different tools to measure the success of those capitalizations or not.
Okay, yeah, thanks. Again, as I don't know who is in what group, I'm just going to pick a person, and I see it just in front of me, Manuel Fleury. So yes, I pick you by surprise. I'm sorry, but I would really like to hear what you say, because you have been somebody who's been involved for a very long time. So what do you think of these questions?
Yeah, Jorge,
and what did you discuss in your group?
Thanks a lot. The thing is, I was listening to me myself. And I don't know, Sylvie from UK, if you could, you were taking notes. It's okay that you take over. I'm really a bit sorry. I was really egomanic as well. And I leave Sylvie to respond to your question.
Oh, Manuel, that's not.
I'm sorry, but I know because you were taking the notes.
I did take notes. It was different. We were toing and froing between different things, but actually Manuel had examples of using scorecards. You know, when we talked about actually measuring, we spent more time thinking about ways of engaging stakeholders, different ways. We started by thinking that, in fact, organizations also have exit interviews, offboarding, the whole idea of capturing institutional knowledge when people leave. We shouldn't leave it only at that stage, but it needs to be continuous, so part of an ongoing process of learning and capitalizing. And then the idea of bringing experiences together to influence, obviously, institutional change. Rodney talked about the example with the farmers, where you can really link the farmers with extension, you know, government and research institutions. So really matching that experiential and scientific knowledge, which is often hard, and actually making those links, you know, cementing those and benefiting from those. Manuel talked about scorecards with organizations he's worked with, and often that was used to measure change at an organizational level, not necessarily, and then trusting that individuals or project teams would continue the learning process and pick up the lessons learned and actually implement them, but not measuring that bit of it. So never really knowing whether that had actually happened, maybe. Yes, and we were talking about making it simple. We were talking about any kind of capitalization, if it could be a regular, simple thing as part of day-to-day work, not just big, massive processes, but a kind of regularity, kind of the way you do things around here.
Thanks, Sylvie. It's great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Manuel. Thanks a lot. I would like to invite somebody else who also mentions that we had a short time. Silva Ferretti from Rome. Where are you? Is it possible for you to share some ideas that you didn't have time or you did share in your group?
I can share a more plausible person. What I was sharing is that it would be really interesting to shift from the idea of measuring, that I think will eventually kill knowledge management, into the idea of understanding. And it was really interesting. I mean, I was provoking and probably took too much time on that, but I really think that we are a victim of a system that want to transform anything in a measure rather than understanding the value of an ecosystem. And for me, it was really interesting that when some of us in the group share an experience that for me was like, wow, we have done great and is inspirational. It was all about talking about the process and not a single measure. So I really invite you. I understand what is the meaning of having to show, but probably we should be the one that help to transform the idea that, to have the idea that we need to substitute, understand where we read measure in our world, because then we can measure something. But if there is no understanding first, there is no measure. And I really think there's a lot to see with what we're trying to do. That is about understanding first and the measure.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. I would like to, we still have a few minutes to invite, if there's somebody who would like to say something for everybody. I know you've been talking and I know there hasn't been enough time, but before we go to the specific questions, is there something to add from the groups?
Yes. Could I say something?
Yes.
I don't know if you recognize me or not, Jorge, but
I do.
I was also in the group with Silva and I found it quite interesting, though very short. But for me, I think one of the important keywords is engagement. And I think if you have a good way to engage people in the process, especially multiple people who have different perspectives, the odds go up substantially of having added value. And I guess maybe linking that engagement with time, the passage of time, because I think it's also important. It's a kind of a, kind of a spiral type of thing when it comes to deepening learning, and it's not something that happens in a moment. It happens over time, and in fact, I would argue that it gets negotiated amongst different people who are involved in collaborating around a particular set of activities. So there's a lot of exchange and mutual exchange and mutual learning, I think, that needs to happen for experience capitalization to happen. So I tend to like the focus on the experience rather than the documentation that happens.
Sure. Thanks. And we have one last, Michael, you wanted to say something, I think, too?
Oh, yes, thank you very much, Jorge.
Please.
Yes, one of the participants in our group had an interesting point, which was much about processes. And in their experience, they had online forms to be able to collect return feedback from experience and experience to be capitalized. But they discovered that they had very low rate of response, and they just opted very quickly for a different format with very fewer questions and more open questions for people to be able to go on a more storytelling mode, so that the raw material might be less formatted, but more just generated, and then leading to a next session, to a next stage, the work of formalizing it and including it into an experience capitalization format. So that I found that very inspiring, because we are very much focused on processes indeed, and sometimes we just lose sight of the extra effort that is required from respondents, especially participants or recipients of our programs, and then just sharing, dividing the efforts between the people who generate the raw information and the treatment of it. Might be quite a fruitful experience to be capitalized on.
Yeah, that is true. I would like to invite you all to add, I'm going to share my screen. While Janetta, you may have a few questions that have been on the chat. If you share a couple of them, please, and I will share my screen in the meantime.
Yes, we have an interesting question from Amandine Varde A. I'm sorry if I don't pronounce correctly your last name. And as I followed the experience capitalization course on FAO last year, I'm wondering how the blended format is different. How's the content changed? Should I follow it again?
Maybe I can reply to that question.
Please.
The blended learning, we wanted actually to take the online course and to show really all what is in it, because very often people don't realize the richness of this e-learning. Because in the e-learning, you have the resources, what are the publications, the website that we use to actually build this course, but we have also created job aids, meaning practical tools that people can use on the job. So in the online course, what we have done, we have clearly indicated all these things, but on top, we have proposed assignment. So for after each lesson, people can use a tool immediately and put into practice what they have learned. And they can start the capitalization process themselves. On top, taking advantage of this course, we decided also to have a little test. And at the end, when people who have done the whole course will receive their badge, which is now the international certificate for having done a course. And what we added webinars. So for each modules, we have had webinar explaining what is in this unit. There are several lessons, there could be 2 or 3 lessons, and each time we were explaining what is in it, and also to give the opportunity of the people to ask us questions. So in the online course, we have tried to have this interaction. And now, due to COVID, we were supposed to have a face-to-face workshop where people would have already known about experience capitalization because they would have done the e-learning version. But then we would have gone one step further with them. It was to finalize their experience that they had started documented, to be able to share it, but also to learn from the facilitation. And so they would be also the facilitator of this process within their organization. So now, because of COVID, we decided to convert this as much as possible, of course. It will replace the face-to-face, but to do mentorship webinars, and we have decided to actually capitalize on specific subjects like COVID-19 response, climate change, extension. So the themes are quite open. And from this online course, we are thinking of moving them to a MOOC. So removing maybe the interactive part, but to keeping all the different elements. So seeing the webinars, having the possibility of the assignments, of seeing the job aids, and to be able to pass the certificate. And then I would like also to take this opportunity to say 2 more things. People were asking, what is the difference between experience capitalization and dissemination of information? Very often, when you're strictly focusing on information sharing, you are explaining what you have done, but you forgot 2 important elements. It's why you have done it this way and how you have done it this way. Because if you explain why and how, you're also thinking about how you did it, what worked, what didn't work, what has to be changed, and you're providing also lessons to others so that they can use what you learned, all your learning. And this is your knowledge that is being capitalized because you're going to share it. And someone who is capitalizing its knowledge is a wealthy person because it's sharing it and not keeping it for oneself. So that's the wealth of experience capitalization. And so these are my 2 points before we leave, because for leaving, we would like to actually have the opportunity to hear from you in the chat, read you, of what is your takeaway and what do we need to change so that we make better use of experience capitalization and engaging with different type of stakeholders, because still sometimes it's not understood. We have been thinking of changing the name. However, at the end, what it means and the way it is being translated is reflecting what it is. But I give Jorge the possibility to complement that.
No, you said it already. I had put a slide and I invite people to give us your final ideas. What is your takeaway in the chat? I see some people are writing already. Please go ahead. We need to finish, and I know you all have to go. But while you are writing, I would like to say thank you very much, Sophie, for this thorough presentation. Thank you, Ginetta, and thank you, Rocio, for helping us getting this going. And of course, thank you very much to all of you for participating. I apologize for the technical problems and for the little time. I really wish we could have not just 1 hour, but perhaps a little bit more to discuss all of this. But thank you very much, and please continue sharing your ideas with us and with everybody.
Just one thing, I have put again the link on the chat of the document where you have taken notes. We will send it to you by email, but if you want to download, you can download it.
Thank you.
That's very nice.
Also, you can save the chat if you want to keep the. If you don't know how to do it, on the chat you will see 3 points, and there you will see it save chat. So it will probably automatically save on a folder that is called Zoom on documents, but that may depend on the computer.
Mm-hmm. And then I've seen several times Anthony asking the same question, so I think he deserves to have an answer, because he's doing his knowledge management strategy and he's asking, do I have to embed experience capitalization? Actually, experience capitalization is the process that you will use in your knowledge management strategy, because and actually these words are very similar. In one of the article in the km4dev journal, a lady was saying, you know, experience capitalization is similar to the knowledge management in English. It's just that here we have done this process one step after another. We have provided a cycle. First, you start to prepare, you frame what you want to do, you plan what you want to do. Then when you implement, you're going to plan everything, you're going to analyze, then you're going to document and then share. And then the last part, which is the most important to get your change, you want to generate change, you have to look at how you adopt, scale up, and how you mainstream it in your organization. So if you take all this together and it is facilitated, this is the process of experience facilitation. And you will see that it's very similar to knowledge management. And always think why you do this, for whom you do it, with whom you do it, and how and when you're going to do it. So this is, in a nutshell, what we have in the course, and I hope that will give you the pleasure to go and be curious to look into it. Thank you so much, and thank you, Ginetta, Rocio, and Jorge, because it was really nice to prepare this session with you.
My pleasure.
Thank you, Ginetta. Thank you, Rocio. Thank you, everybody, for participating. We see each other again in the next session, of course, and in the closing session. See you there.
Thank you. Bye. Bye, everyone.